I'm Ashley. Sitting alone in my small, quiet apartment, I often find myself looking at the screenshots I took that fateful day. The 568 likes, the laughing emojis, and the hurtful comments still sting, even though it's been a few months since the whole ordeal. It all started when I moved out of my mother's house, and she decided to publicly humiliate me on Facebook. My family was far from normal. My mother, Margaret, was a controlling and manipulative woman. She always had to be in charge, and anyone who dared to challenge her was met with her wrath. My younger sister, Lily, was her favorite, and she could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. I, on the other hand, was the scapegoat, the one who was always blamed for everything. I remember when I was 22, fresh out of community college and starting my first real job as a paralegal at a small law firm in Denver. I had worked 2 jobs throughout college to avoid student loans, so I was in a relatively good financial position. One Tuesday evening, my mother called me. She used her sweet, persuasive voice, the one she reserved for when she needed something from me. "Ashley, I need you to co-sign the mortgage for a new house. My credit score isn't good enough, and I've been turned down twice. It'll be easy, you just lend me your name, and you won't have to pay anything. This is for the family," she said. I was young and naive. She was my mother, and I trusted her. I didn't hire a lawyer or read the full contract. I simply drove to the title company during my lunch break and signed where they told me to. She never gave me a copy of the documents, and when I asked a few weeks later, she waved it off, saying she kept everything filed together to avoid confusion. Over the next 8 years, I focused on my work and set up autopay for the mortgage from my checking account. She said it was just temporary, until she got settled. But the autopay never stopped, and she never asked me to cancel it. I never questioned it because I thought that's what families do, you help, and you don't keep score. However, my mother had a different idea. The first year, she asked me to pay $400 a month for rent. I didn't argue because I was living there. The second year, she raised it to $550, saying property taxes had gone up. By the fourth year, I was paying $1,100 a month, plus the mortgage autopay, plus a share of the utilities. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was essentially funding the entire house while my mother contributed nothing. At every family gathering, my mother would complain to our relatives about how I didn't contribute. She painted a picture of me as a lazy, freeloading daughter who did nothing but take up space. She told Aunt Grace that Lily was the only one who really cared about her, and that I was just a burden. I overheard these conversations many times, but I never confronted her. I thought the truth would eventually come out. 3 months before I moved out, Lily came over for dinner. She brought a bottle of wine and said, "Ashley, you've been here a long time. You deserve your own place, your own life." My mother, who was standing in the kitchen doorway, nodded in agreement and said, "She's right. I'm doing better now, and I don't need you here as much. Go enjoy yourself." It felt like a permission, a long-awaited acknowledgement. I started apartment hunting the next week and signed a lease on a 1-bedroom in downtown Denver 3 months later. Moving day was a bittersweet experience. After 8 years in that house, my room was empty in just 20 minutes. As I carried the last box down the hallway, I passed my mother's filing cabinet. I'd asked about it years ago, and she'd said it was just old paperwork. I briefly thought about opening it but decided to trust her. On the day I moved into my new apartment, I was sitting on a cardboard box, unpacking a lamp, when my phone started buzzing. I opened Facebook and saw my mother's post, "Good riddance. The 30-year-old leech who's been bleeding this family dry for years is finally gone." Below the post were a cascade of reactions, laughing emojis, thumbs up, and hurtful comments. There were 568 likes in just 30 minutes, and Lily had tagged almost every relative we had. I was shocked but also determined. I didn't cry or call anyone. I screenshotted every like, comment, and laughing emoji, and then I liked the post myself. I knew something was off about the timing and the way Lily had tagged so many people so quickly. It was clear that this was a pre-planned attack. The next day, I drove back to my mother's house to pick up a box of winter clothes I'd left in the garage. When I got there, the house was empty. As I walked through the kitchen, I noticed a stack of mail hidden behind a ceramic figurine. One envelope caught my eye. It was from First Western Mortgage and addressed to me. It had already been opened. I pulled out the letter and read that I'd successfully refinanced my house, and the new loan amount was $285,000. I was stunned because I'd never refinanced anything. I took photos of the letter, the envelope, and the postmark. When I compared the signature on the refinance document with my real signature, it was clear that it was a forgery. Someone had forged my signature to extract approximately $120,000 in equity from the house without my knowledge. Over the next few days, I did some more digging. I called the Denver County Register of Deeds and found out that the property, which was previously held by my mother and me, had been transferred to Lily's sole ownership 2 weeks before I moved out. I also checked my credit report and found an unauthorized hard inquiry from First Western Mortgage 6 months prior. I called Aunt Grace to confirm my suspicions. She told me that my mother had said I'd agreed to sign the house over to Lily because I didn't want the responsibility anymore. I realized that my mother had been spreading this false story to the whole family. I also discovered that Lily had set up a mail redirect 14 months ago, rerouting all my mortgage statements and important documents to her apartment. She'd been intercepting my mail for over a year to prevent me from finding out about the fraud. And I found out that the $120,000 extracted from the house had been wired to a joint account held by my mother and Lily at a local credit union. I put all the evidence, the refinance documents, the deed transfer, the signature comparison, the mail forwarding records, and the bank statements into a binder, just like I did with case files at work. I showed it to my coworker, Sarah, who was also a paralegal. She said, "Ashley, she didn't need the money. She just wanted to make sure you had nothing to fall back on." I knew I had to take action. I called a real estate attorney, Mr. Thompson, who had a reputation for handling fraud cases. I met with him and presented the binder of evidence. He was shocked and said, "This is not a family argument. This is fraud, multiple potential felonies, including forgery, fraudulent conveyance of real property, and unauthorized use of your identity." He drafted a cease and desist letter and filed for an emergency judicial freeze on the deed transfer and the joint account. He also recommended subpoenaing my mother and Lily's phone records. A few days later, I sent an email to Aunt Grace with all the evidence, explaining what had really happened. 23 minutes later, she called me, her voice trembling. "Ashley, is this real? This signature. It's not yours?" I confirmed everything, and she said she was going to call my mother. True to form, my mother started calling relatives, trying to spin the story. She said I'd photoshopped the documents and was having a breakdown. But this time, she was up against hard evidence. Bank records and county deeds don't lie. A few days later, I received a call from Mr. Thompson. My mother and Lily had retained an attorney, Mr. Harris, who filed a preliminary response claiming that I was a non-contributing occupant who had voluntarily relinquished my interest in the property. They even cited the Facebook post as evidence. I brought another binder to Mr. Thompson's office, this one filled with 8 years of bank statements showing that I'd paid the mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. Mr. Thompson said, "This destroys their entire defense. And if they forged your signature and then claimed you were non-contributing, this may constitute fraud upon the court." We also obtained the phone records, which showed text messages between my mother and Lily. 3 weeks before I moved out, my mother had texted Lily, "She's looking at apartments. We need to move faster." Lily replied, "I'll file the mail thing this week." And my mother said, "Make sure the signature looks right. Use the light table." The meeting with my mother, Lily, and their attorney took place at Mr. Thompson's office. My mother walked in wearing a new suit, looking composed. Mr. Harris opened the meeting by saying that I was a non-contributing occupant and that the deed transfer was a family agreement. Mr. Thompson calmly presented the bank statements, showing that I'd paid $148,000 over 8 years. My mother tried to claim that she'd given me cash to transfer, but Mr. Thompson showed the original email confirmation of the autopay setup from my personal laptop, with no record of her contributions. Aunt Grace, who was present at the meeting, spoke up. "Margaret, you told me she never paid a dime." My mother tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then, Mr. Thompson presented the phone records. My mother's face turned pale when she saw the text messages. She turned to Lily and said, "You told me you deleted those." Lily snapped back, "I did delete them." "Then how do they have them?" In that moment, the truth came out. I stood up and said, "You called me a leech in front of 568 people. You told everyone I was a burden, but I paid your mortgage for 8 years. I want to be clear about who was really feeding off whom." Mr. Thompson concluded by saying that the deed transfer would be voided, my name would be restored to the property, and I intended to file criminal complaints for forgery, identity fraud, and wire fraud. My mother started crying, and Lily tried to shift the blame onto my mother, saying it was all her idea. The legal aftermath was swift. The deed transfer was voided within 10 days, and my name was restored to the property. The refinance was frozen for investigation. Of the $120,000 that had been extracted, $40,000 remained in Lily's portion of the joint account, frozen by court order. My mother had moved the other $80,000 to an offshore account she'd opened 3 months after the refinance. My mother was charged with 2 counts of forgery and 1 count of fraud, and wire fraud charges were pending. Lily was under investigation for aiding and abetting and federal mail fraud. The salon where Lily worked let her go because of the Facebook fallout. Aunt Grace called me to apologize, saying she should have asked my side of the story. She also said she'd stop speaking to my mother. A few other relatives reached out to apologize as well. My mother tried to call me a few times, but I blocked her numbers. She left a voicemail, crying and saying she never meant to hurt me, that the Facebook post was just venting, and that the house was always going to be mine. But I couldn't believe her anymore. I deleted the voicemail. It's been 3 months since the meeting at Mr. Thompson's office. I live alone in my 1-bedroom apartment, enjoying the quiet. I'm selling my share of the house through my attorney, and the equity that's left will help me start over. I've changed my phone number and deactivated my Facebook account. I've learned that in some families, you have to keep score and verify everything, because the people who trust blindly can lose everything. I won't be that naive girl again. I'll always keep my receipts.